My grandson Mike was walking with his head down, shuffling his feet. It was just past 9 a.m., a time when he should have already been in school. I wondered why he was here. Concerned, I called out to him and invited him into the house. As soon as Mike came in, he took off his backpack and sat down on the sofa. "I'll put your backpack here for you." When I picked it up from the floor to move it to the sofa, it was so heavy that it seemed like it could make a loud thud. It was clearly too heavy for just textbooks and notebooks. "This backpack is awfully heavy." As I muttered in surprise, he suddenly burst into tears. It was as if some tension inside him had snapped, and his tears wouldn't stop for a while.
It's all my fault."
"What?" Sniffling, he slowly began to speak.
"She said kids who aren't smart have to do this or else."
Crying, Mike opened his backpack. When I saw what was inside, I trembled with anger. Why would anyone make him do something like this? Shaking with rage, I picked up my smartphone. I wasn't sure what kind of expression I had, but Mike looked at me with slightly fearful eyes. Maybe I had a scary face at that moment. "I'm just going to make a quick call." I tried my hardest to put on a smile and left the living room. "My name is Kathy. I live in an apartment a little way from the city center. My only son, Tony, now lives with his son, my grandson, Mike. Tony's wife passed away in an accident about 3 years ago, around the time Mike started elementary school. After the funeral, it seemed like it would be difficult for Tony to recover. However, he said that, while watching Mike sleep peacefully, he made a firm decision.
"I'm going to take care of Mike. I'll raise him well, taking care of him for my wife's sake too."
From that moment on, he threw himself into being a single father. He managed everything, from attending school events and being a school committee member, to making Mike's breakfast and dinner, as well as doing the laundry. I thought he might give up after a few months, but I remember how, over the phone, he laughed and said, "It's harder than I thought," with a cheerful tone. I realized he must have found it rewarding. Tony worked for a large company, but at the time, he didn't have too much work. However, as his workload increased, he struggled to balance both his job and housework. One time, Mike got a fever at school, and Tony wasn't able to pick him up. This was the first time Tony had ever called me for help. I think he realized he was reaching his limit. After that, he gradually began asking me to help with raising Mike. Fortunately, my apartment is less than 5 minutes away from Tony and Mike's place. On days when Tony knew he would be late due to work, he would let me know in advance, and I would take care of Mike. Mike comes over excitedly after school. At first, he was shy and reserved, but as he got more comfortable, he became quite the chatterbox.
"Grandma, listen. Today, I did jump rope."
Lately, he's also been talking a lot about a new friend he made, a boy named Kevin. And then, this happened, and oh, also. Mike's stories go on and on. He joyfully talks about the everyday happenings at school. I find myself thinking, Tony was like this when he was little too, wasn't he? Like father, like son. I muse, feeling nostalgic as I listen to Mike's stories. As Tony's work grew busier, the days when I looked after my grandson increased around the time he entered 3rd grade. I appreciated his hard work, but I didn't want him to push himself too hard. Even on his rare days off, Instead of relaxing, he always said he had plans.
I made a promise to Mike. We're going to the zoo on this day.
Another time, he said he had plans to hang out with a colleague from work, and he left Mike with me. Could it be that he's seeing someone? I tried not to pry, but a mother's intuition is hard to ignore. No, don't dig into it unnecessarily. I told myself that and instead focused on listening to my grandson's endless chatter. Not long after that, I received a message from Tony saying, "There's someone I'd like you to meet." The next Sunday, Tony, Mike, and a woman named Maria came to my house.
Nice to meet you. I've been seeing Tony.
As she politely bowed, her sleek, straight hair swayed. Her graceful and refined manner of speaking almost made me sigh in admiration. Oh my. I didn't know Tony had such a lovely girlfriend.
We met through a friend. We've been dating since around last year, and I'm thinking about remarrying.
Remarrying? But what about Mike?
I've already met Mike several times. He's so adorable.
She bought me ice cream at the zoo.
It seemed that Mike had already met her and had grown fond of her to some extent. Indeed, she seemed kind and good-natured. If she was someone both Tony and Mike had chosen, I felt there was no need for concern. I see. Well then, we need to celebrate, don't we? That day, I made a feast to celebrate the beginning of a new chapter for our family. After that, Tony, Maria, and Mike started living together as a family of 3. Now, a few months later, I rarely have the chance to look after Mike, and I feel a bit lonely because of it. One day, I received a message from Tony saying that he would be moving to the city for a job assignment. He mentioned something about being involved in launching a new project, though I didn't quite understand the details. Despite just having started his new life as a newlywed, he already seemed busy. As he had said, a little while later, Tony left for his job assignment. He sent me a short message. I'm off. Please take care of Maria and Mike. Of course, I was prepared to support them. Becoming a mother so suddenly must be a lot of pressure for Maria. Maria, if you ever need help, don't hesitate to ask me. When I offered her those words, she gave me a gentle smile.
Thank you so much.
Soon after Tony left for his assignment, Maria occasionally asked me to look after Mike. I was happy to have more opportunities to see my grandson. I gladly accepted, thinking it would be nice to hear Mike's stories again, just like before. I made it a habit to bake pancakes whenever it was time for Mike to come over after school.
Grandma, I'm home.
Welcome back. The pancakes are ready. I smiled as he shouted with excitement and sat down at the table.
Grandma, listen. Today at school.
As his cheerful chatter began, I listened attentively. That day, after finishing his pancakes, he did a bit of homework before heading home. On a warm spring day, as I gazed at the fluffy clouds in the sky, I was tidying up the garden. Our apartment complex has a shared garden, and every few months, it's my turn to help with the cleaning. The cleaning is simple, just picking up litter and sweeping around the flower beds. After finishing the sweeping, I happened to look up and saw Mike walking slowly with his head down. Judging by the direction he was coming from, It seemed like he was returning from school. But it was just past 9 a.m., a time when school should have already started. So I wondered why he was here. His expression was gloomy, and he didn't seem like his usual self. Concerned, I called out to him. "Good morning, Mike. Are you already on your way back?" Startled, he looked up at me, but with a downcast face, he shook his head.
No. I left early because my stomach hurts.
With just that, he turned his gaze away, clearly not wanting to talk, and trudged away slowly. Usually, he would happily call out, "I'm off to school," and leave with a spring in his step. But I had never seen him look as troubled as he did today. I hoped his stomach pain would go away soon, and with that thought in mind, I continued cleaning for the rest of the day. However, this wasn't the only time I saw him walking like that. On another day, when I went outside to take out the trash, I saw Mike again, walking with his head down. On yet another day, when I stepped out to clean, there he was, slowly walking along. His steps were heavy, and even from a distance, he looked tired and drained of energy. What's going on? It doesn't seem like he just forgot something. I also heard from other residents, who had seen him while cleaning the shared garden, that they'd noticed him walking by. They seemed to remember that Mike used to visit my room frequently. Ever since, whenever I looked outside around that time, I saw Mike trudging along, almost every day. I grew increasingly worried. Could something have happened at school? Now that I think about it, he hasn't come over to my house recently. It's been that way ever since the day he left school early, saying his stomach hurt. Could that be connected somehow? Concerned, I called Maria, and her response surprised me.
He hasn't been going to school recently.
What? Mike hasn't? I was taken aback by her casual response. She went on to explain that Mike would leave for school but just couldn't bring himself to go. Apparently, what should be a 10-minute walk home from school takes him 45 minutes. It was hard to believe just hearing it. But, thinking about the way he's been acting recently, it started to make sense. Did you ask him what's going on? Maria hesitated before saying, "Well, actually."
He's been having a hard time keeping up with his studies, and I think that's why school has become tough for him.
I gave a short acknowledgement, but Maria, on the other end of the phone, sighed as she said, "I want to help him, but..." There was something detached, almost indifferent, about the way she said it. It felt so different from how Tony would have reacted. Have you talked to Tony about this?
I haven't told him anything. I want Tony to focus on his work.
Maybe you should say something, at least a word or two? Or perhaps talk to his teacher?
Kathy, you're being too meddlesome. Mike will figure things out on his own.
Her lack of concern for Mike didn't sit well with me, so I decided to ask her directly. Aren't you worried about Mike? To my surprise, she responded lightly.
It's not something to be that worried about. Everyone has times when they don't feel like going to school.
Kids are like that, she added, and then she ended the call. As I stared at the darkened screen of my smartphone, I thought to myself, but Mike used to love school, and he always talked about it so excitedly. He even once boasted about asking his friends for help with things he didn't understand in class. His friend Kevin was good at science, and Mike often told me how much he learned from him. That's why I couldn't fully believe Maria's explanation that Mike was struggling with school. And while she seemed to think Mike would figure it out on his own, there are limits to what a child can handle. I didn't think time would solve this problem. Maybe I should ask Mike directly. I thought to myself as I pictured his slumped figure. It might seem like meddling, but I couldn't just leave him like this. It felt too cruel. The sky was bright and clear, but for some reason, it felt like dark clouds were looming over everything. The day after I called Maria, I found myself standing by the flower beds outside my apartment early in the morning. From this spot, I could clearly see if Mike was walking by. It wasn't ideal to be waiting like this, but I felt I had no choice. After a short while, I saw him again, walking with his head down, just as I had seen him before. He looked thinner than the last time I saw him. "Hello, Mike," I called out. He looked startled and glanced up at me, still with a troubled expression. "Hey, why don't you stop by Grandma's place for a bit?" After a brief hesitation, Mike quietly nodded. The cheerful, energetic boy who used to greet me with a bright smile seemed to be gone, replaced by someone strangely quiet and subdued. I invited him into the house and sat him down at the living room table. "Let me take care of your backpack," I said, as I picked up the bag he had dropped on the floor. When I lifted it, it was so heavy I thought it would make a thudding sound. Could a backpack full of textbooks and notebooks really be this heavy? "This bag is awfully heavy," I muttered in surprise, and at that moment, Mike burst into tears. It was as though some string of tension had snapped inside him, and his tears wouldn't stop for a while. I gently rubbed his back, waiting for him to calm down before asking what was going on.
It's all my fault.
Sniffling, he started speaking bit by bit. "What?"
Mom says I have to use a dictionary because I'm dumb.
As he spoke, he opened his backpack, revealing several dictionaries inside. I took them out, an English dictionary, a history dictionary, and a dictionary of English idioms. Even though they were used for school, this was far too much. "And you've been carrying all this around?"
Mom said that kids who aren't smart have to do this, or they'll never get better.
According to him, it started with just the English dictionary, but then, at some point, Maria added the history and idiom dictionaries. It shocked me to hear that Maria had forced him to carry so many dictionaries. This weight was far too heavy for any elementary school student to carry. When Mike complained that his shoulders hurt, I had him take off his shirt, and I saw the red, raw marks on his shoulders where the backpack straps had rubbed against him. It was a painful sight. "That must have been hard for you." "Why?"
I didn't want to carry all these dictionaries.
"You don't need these, right? Aren't there tablets or something you can use instead?"
Yeah. But Mom says using paper dictionaries makes me smarter.
That's what Maria had told him, and that's why he had reluctantly stuffed his bag with dictionaries. From what I was hearing, this felt less like strict parenting and more like harassment. I couldn't understand what was driving her to do this, but I knew one thing: it was unacceptable. Shaking with anger, I grabbed my smartphone. I had no idea what kind of expression I was wearing, but Mike looked at me with slightly fearful eyes. Maybe I had a scary look on my face.
"Grandma, what's wrong?"
"Nothing, sweetie. I'm just going to make a quick call." I forced a smile and left the living room. After taking a deep breath, I called Maria. After a few rings, a lazy-sounding voice answered, "Hello? Maria? Can I talk to you for a moment?" I asked, trying to keep my trembling voice in check. In the background, I heard a faint, and a man's voice that I didn't recognize.
Now's not a good time. It's nothing. Forget about it.
With that, she abruptly hung up the phone. The first part was clearly directed at me, but the latter half seemed to be spoken to the man nearby. Who could that have been? It definitely wasn't Tony's voice, and besides, Tony was away on a work assignment. Puzzled, I returned to the living room, where Mike began to speak. His words shocked me to the core. Maria had been bringing a man, who wasn't Tony, into the house while Mike was at school. Mike found out about it one day when school ended early. Ever since then, he had been spending most of his afternoons at the park, trying to kill time. She had also been imposing food restrictions on Mike. Taking advantage of Tony's absence, she had started slacking on meals.
When Dad was here, she would make omelets or whatever I wanted.
He said this, his head hanging low. Apparently, Maria had told him that if he ever told anyone about the situation, she would never cook for him again. So, he kept quiet, enduring his hunger. That day, when I saw him walking past while I was cleaning the garden, he must have been hiding his discomfort. In a world where he should have been eating until he was full and enjoying school, he was instead growing thinner, walking back and forth between school and home with painful marks on his shoulders. What kind of person would subject a young child to this? My anger flared up even more as I trembled, clutching my smartphone. Mike. Grandma is going to your house now. I'm going to have a talk with Maria.
But she told me I'm not allowed to go in if a man's there.
Don't worry, leave this to Grandma. I borrowed Mike's spare key and told him to stay here while I headed out of the apartment. Tony's apartment was right nearby. I used the key Mike had given me to enter.
Wah. Kathy? What are you doing here?
I found myself face to face with Maria and an unfamiliar man standing in the entryway. It seemed she had been about to send the man off. The man gave Maria an awkward look, clearly hoping for her to provide some sort of cover. But before Maria could do anything, she tried to slip past me and rush out the door. Wait. I quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her back.
Let go of me. This has nothing to do with me.
Nothing to do with you? Of course it does. Explain yourself. I motioned for the man to come inside as well, and we all went into the living room. I made the two of them sit down on the floor and asked for an explanation of what had been going on. Sir, we haven't met before. I'm her mother-in-law, I said calmly, introducing myself. The man's eyes widened in surprise. And what exactly is your relationship?
I don't know him.
Maria answered immediately, leaving the man shocked. Wasn't he her boyfriend? You said this was your place, so why is your mother-in-law here? He asked, bombarding her with questions. It seemed Maria had been pretending to be single and cheating. Now that I looked closer, I noticed Maria wasn't wearing her wedding ring. Whenever she came over with Tony, she always had it on.
Kathy, why are you here? If you were going to come, you could have at least made an appointment.
Don't change the subject. Mike's been struggling so much because of you." In truth, struggling was putting it lightly. I wanted to yell at her right then and there, but I held myself back from acting childish. I forced myself to remain calm and continued. "You told Mike not to come home and to spend his time in the park, didn't you?"
I did not.
"You stopped making proper meals for him and were off having an affair, weren't you?"
I wasn't.
No matter what I said, Maria refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Eventually, even the man beside her began questioning her, saying, "You told me you didn't have any kids. Was that a lie?" Seemingly fed up, Maria, in a fit of frustration, confessed everything to him.
Fine, yes, I'm married. The kid you saw is my stepchild. But my husband's away on a work assignment.
The man looked shocked and dismayed, left speechless by the revelation. Maria turned her face away from him, wearing a smug expression. "I'm going to tell Tony about all of this," I said firmly.
Do you really think he'll believe you? He loves me more than anyone.
Her arrogance was astounding, and she laughed mockingly. "He won't just believe me because of my words alone, but—" Then I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I had activated the video mode on the camera app from the moment I introduced myself. Everything from Maria's confession to our earlier conversation was recorded. This should be more than enough to convince him. I watched as Maria's face turned pale in an instant.
No, please, delete that right now.
Her voice shook, on the verge of tears. But there was no undoing what had already been said. "Whatever happens next, you'll need to discuss it with Tony," I said. I sent the video to Tony and left the apartment. As I reached the door, I could hear the two of them arguing, but I pretended not to notice. The day after everything came to light, Tony hurried back home. It just so happened that there was a long holiday weekend, so they spent 3 full days discussing everything as a family. Of course, there were many things the couple needed to talk about privately, so I took care of Mike for one of those days. From what Tony told me, here's how things unfolded. At the beginning of their marriage, Maria genuinely found Mike to be cute. She thought she could make it work with this family. But soon, she noticed that Mike was very talkative. When he came home from school, he would go on and on, never stopping. Even when told to do his homework, he would finish it quickly because he was smart, and then start talking again. At first, she would respond casually, but over time, she grew tired of it.
I just can't keep up with his endless chatter.
She said this, leaving Tony at a loss for words. She went on.
And every time I'm with you, Mike is always around. We can't even have a proper newlywed moment together.
So, was that why you were tormenting him? Because you saw him as a burden?
Of course.
But you said you were okay with the fact that I had a child.
I said I was okay, but you should have taught him to read the room better.
She went on to accuse Tony of not understanding her feelings, claiming she had been lonely and that he hadn't paid enough attention to her. Finally, she blamed Tony for her affair.
It's your fault I cheated. You should be the one reflecting on your actions.
What do you mean?
Tony was left utterly bewildered and overwhelmed by disbelief.
I can't stay with you anymore. What's more, I can't forgive you for bullying Mike.
With that, Tony demanded a divorce. Maria refused.
I'm not getting a divorce.
But Tony was determined. He was shocked by how truly cruel she was deep down. Tony canceled the lease on their apartment and moved in with me, bringing Mike with him. Luckily, I had an extra room, so I let the two of them use it. As for Maria, unable to stay in the apartment, she moved to another place on her own. After that, Tony consulted with a lawyer and successfully finalized the divorce, along with filing for alimony. Later, we discovered that Maria's affair partner was also married. In other words, they had both been pretending to be single while cheating. The married man's wife eventually found out about the affair, and he was served with divorce papers as well. I'm sure that man must have been overwhelmed too. Both Maria and the man received alimony claims from his respective spouse. Maria, seeing an opportunity, tried to reconcile and get back together with her affair partner. However, the man rejected her, finding her unbearable. He reportedly told her that he couldn't be with a woman who could so easily pretend to be someone else. It was truly a case of karma. Maria was left alone, now burdened with debts from having to pay alimony to both Tony and the man's wife. Crushed by the weight of her debt, she sometimes tries to contact Tony. But Tony, having no obligation to help her now that they are divorced, has coldly turned her away. Apparently, Maria now works 2 jobs, both day and night, living like a worn-out rag. After this, I doubt even she will ever consider cheating again. On the other hand, Mike remained downhearted for a while. It seemed that what Maria had done still weighed heavily on his mind. He struggled with sleepless nights and a lack of appetite, affecting his overall well-being. Upon realizing this, Tony took immediate action. He spoke to his company and arranged to cut his assignment short, allowing him to come home early. Fortunately, the project he had been working on was wrapping up, so he was able to return sooner than expected. On weekends and holidays, he started spending more time with Mike, going out together and helping him with his studies. At night, when Mike couldn't sleep, Tony would sometimes sleep next to him. I, too, made sure to be involved in caring for my grandson, keeping a close eye on his recovery. Gradually, Mike's appetite began to return, and he started focusing on his studies again. At one point, he couldn't even bring himself to eat pancakes, but now he devours them with ease. Tony and I both breathed a sigh of relief as we saw his appetite return. Mike, who had always been an active boy, even started jumping rope at the park again.
Grandma, do you think I'll be able to play with Kevin again?
He paused mid-jump, quietly voicing his concern. I reassured him. Of course. I'm sure Kevin's waiting for you too. With help from his teacher, Mike was slowly able to start attending school again, beginning with visits to the nurse's office. Little by little, Mike recovered, and within 6 months, he was back to going to school regularly. He admitted he was nervous when he first stepped back into the classroom. But as he spent more time with his classmates, he quickly fit back in. When he came home, his face would light up as he excitedly recounted everything that happened during the day.
Grandma, guess what? Today, Kevin and I played during lunch break.
It seemed that Mike had rekindled his friendship with Kevin. Next month, there's going to be a birthday party, and Mike has been invited. That's wonderful. Have fun.
I want to bring a birthday present. What should I get him?
As I listened to each of his thoughts, I smiled warmly, grateful to see the return of the bright, cheerful Mike. I look forward to watching my grandson continue to grow and flourish. How did you enjoy today's story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.